Colin Judge, welcome to the Modern Warrior podcast.
Gav, thanks for having me.
It's an absolute delight and an honor, man. And I've been following your content there for some time, and you seem to have come out of nowhere. And I noticed you on a very good man's podcast some months ago, Ryan Curtis, who's sat in that chair, and I've been on his podcast as well. And incredible story, incredible background in terms of what you've gone through to get to where you are today. And sort of like to dive into that in this conversation as well, to get to know you. You're doing a lot of good work at the moment, but I'm always interested in the individual behind the work and to know you better. So to sort of bring it back to earlier days, and obviously you're born into this world and looking around and very different to everyone else that's walking around and able-bodied and everything else. And what were your sort of earlier memories of those type of experiences in your life, going back to childhood days and the experiences you had?
Yeah, well, I think my childhood days, they were a lot simpler, I would say. My parents played a huge part in my upbringing. And I think from the beginning, my mum really had a great insight, because I was the first one born in Ireland with my condition. And I don't know how she had this. It was such a good insight that she had from the very beginning, that a simple one, just that the world wasn't set up for me and that I was going to need to find my own way. And, she hoped and believed that I would eventually be independent someday. And so from the beginning, that they just didn't wrap me in cotton wool. They were always there as a support, but they, and the story I always tell is I went to an able-bodied school, and we had to wear a school uniform, and my mum and dad, they left the school uniform out on my bed every morning. And from the age of 4, I started going to school, and there was no chance I could put on a shirt. Never mind, a tie is difficult with 2 hats.
Yeah.
But of course, the shirt and tie was there every morning, and I tried to put it on, and I failed in putting it on most mornings until the age of 9, when I was finally able to dress myself. And that's such a simple story that I always tell. And I think it meant having a positive relationship with failure. And I think back in my childhood days, I didn't really notice that I was different. Like, my progress was probably much slower to my peers, but it was only really in the teenage years that I noticed that I was different. And, suddenly the obstacles were far greater than putting on a shirt and tie. And, I suppose I felt very left out. Like I said to you earlier, I was never bullied in school, but I always say that being excluded is nearly worse than. I wanted to be part of the fun, I would say. Nobody wants to be bullied, but I was never part of the laughing and the joking, and I kind of wish that I was. And then of course, the lads started playing rugby. I went to an able-bodied school, a big rugby school, St. Michael's College, and my friends all started playing rugby, and that wasn't an option for me. And I remember just feeling very left out. I really wanted a sport. I had nothing to do in the evenings. And, I think that the lads sort of bonded through rugby the majority of the year, played the sport. And, as a result, I was never really involved in like social gatherings on the weekends. And, years went by, and I always wondered, why I was never invited. And, the reason really was just that they weren't sort of comfortable. They didn't think that I would want that. And, it's amazing looking back. That was as simple as me just going up to the lads one day and saying, why am I ever invited? And it was, I remember the first one of the lads said, "Oh, there's a few steps up to the house," and it was that was as simple as the reason.
That was the obstacle.
Yeah, that was the obstacle. And I always look back on that as people are often a lot nicer than they seem. But I think growing up with a disability in Ireland, I needed to take the initiative a lot. And, it was actually when I did find a sport, I remember going to a sports camp with my younger brother, able-bodied brother Niall, and trying out lots of different sports, because I wasn't going to be rugby, but I had to find a sport that I liked. I loved football and Manchester United, and I really wanted a sport that I could be competitive at. And I remember trying out 7 or 8 different sports at that sports camp, and Of course, he beat me at all of them, even though he was 2 years younger than me. My brother and I were very close. He didn't take it easy on me. So, I remember playing wheelchair basketball with him, wheelchair rugby, cricket, everything. He beat me at everything. But table tennis was the 8th sport that we tried, and that was the only one that I could beat him at. So I said, I'm going to give this one a go. And, even though I beat my brother that day, it took 2 or 3 more months for me to build up the courage to send an email to the coach in UCD at the time. And UCD Table Tennis Club, it was the biggest table tennis club in Ireland at the time. And it was an able-bodied club. And I just, I felt, I'm not good enough to play with these guys. They won't want me there, that I'll be a nuisance. And, I'm the only one with a disability. And, why would they want me there? And this went on for months until the day that I finally sent the email. And the rest is history. My coach at the time sort of took me under his wing, brought me down to the club that evening. All the lads were very good to me. They supported me. They still support me. I'm still part of the UCD Table Tennis Club 20 years later. And my progress, of course, was much slower than the lads, and I was the worst in the hall. And I probably was a nuisance at times. But the rest is history. I've become number 1 in Ireland. I've been European champion. I've been to 2 Paralympics, hopefully 3, as I was telling you about earlier on. But I often just look back on those moments as, sometimes we just need to face our fears, and we need to take the initiative, even no matter how uncomfortable it is. And it probably sounds like nothing to a lot of the listeners, just sending an email to a coach, but that was such a big deal for me at the time. I didn't have any confidence, and I didn't believe that I could be good at anything. And, just sending that email meant that I found table tennis. I found a sport, and found a sport that I could be good at eventually. And, the success that I achieved in table tennis just translated to other areas in my life. And it was all due to sending that email.
Yeah, it's funny how we just get caught in our own heads about assumptions and beliefs and what other people will think of me if I ask, and sort of just getting out of our own way and going, okay, let's just make the move. Let's ask the question.
If you don't try, you'll never know. And God knows where I'd be had I not sent that email,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's, but at the same time, those assumptions were legitimate as well, because you had grown up with a process of feeling as though you've been left out, that you didn't belong, not good enough. And again, this sort of being expressed or being shown to you through your peers in terms of how they sort of went their own path and didn't sound like they looked out for you or invited you along. And without those conversations, we don't have the answers. And without the answers, then we sort of try to figure out ourselves.
And we get inside our own head.
Yeah, why did they leave me behind, and what's going on here? Whereas if you ask the question at the conversation, you realize they were just afraid to bring me because I wouldn't be able to get up, but they thought I would be able to get up a couple of steps or whatever.
And completely understandable as well, because there was so little sort of education around disability. From the lads' point of view, I was the only person they knew with a disability. So how would they know how to treat someone with a disability? And I suppose the answer is not any differently, really.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because I was just like the lads. I wanted to go to the parties and talk to the girls, and I would have watched the rugby matches, but they thought that I wouldn't want any of that, or I wouldn't be comfortable with it. And I probably wasn't comfortable with it in the beginning, but only after that conversation did I start to socialize and become more comfortable with all that. And
it's like that sort of thing of, people may look at you and feel as though you've got the problem or the problem is with you, whereas the problem is with them, because they're seeing it through a lens of disability or a lens
they don't
of
have the same perspective. Everyone has a different perspective.
Yeah. But essentially, you're a human being and a man just like everyone else. You're a teenager just like everyone else.
Exactly.
And if you have that conversation, they start to realize, Colin, you have similar interests to us. You're actually a lot more like us than we realized. And that must be very difficult in those years. Like the teenage years, they're sort of where, and I've had this conversation with some teenagers that I've worked with, is asking a 13, 14, maybe up to 15, 16-year-old kid, like, who's the most important people in your life, or who are the most important people in your life? But they're most likely not going to tell you it's their parents, it's their
exactly.
friends.
Yeah.
And then the most important people in your life at that age, from your perspective, sort of just drifted away or walked away. And then you feel less important because of the disconnection there. So was that a whole process of teenage years of really being alone?
Yeah, like I'd say of course I had friends during the teenage years, and they did look out for me, but I felt excluded. I wasn't with them as much as I would have liked to be. I was with them in school, and they were all very nice to me, and I was never bullied. And I always try and communicate this in the best way, that I'm not saying that I wanted to be bullied, but like a lot of the lads, and certainly in Michael, and there's different levels of bullying, but there was laughing and joking and bullying, if that's what you want to call it, going on. And I often wish that I was a part of that, because I think I would have been well able to take it, even though of course the lads would never have dreamed about making a joke to someone in a wheelchair, and completely understandably. But I would have liked if they did, and I would have been able to give it back to them. And that's a story I always tell, as to the lads were always nice to me, they were always there, but I did feel excluded from sort of the relationships that they had among themselves. And it was only really then in transition year, and I'd been playing table tennis for a few years at this stage, and I was number 1 in Ireland, and I was more confident than I was at 13, 14. And it was only then that I had the confidence to say, what's going on here, boys? Like we get on so well, we laugh and joke in the classroom, and then I'm never invited out on the weekends, or I'm never a part of the fun, and what's the story with that? And it was all just like, oh, we didn't think you'd be interested, and it was so innocent.
Their own assumptions. And yeah,
exactly. Yeah. But I suppose it was hard for the 15-year-old me with one arm and no legs to even have that conversation and to address the issue, because I didn't actually know what the reason was or what they were going to say.
Yeah.
They could have said, "Who do you think you are?"
Yeah, of course. Yeah. I think it's important for everyone to hear that. Even parents or even teenagers are listening to this, is like, ask the question, because the question,
the worst thing
that you're not asking, is possibly the question that they're also reluctant to answer,
exactly.
or to hear. So ultimately, it takes one of you to have the courage to step up and ask, or one of you to have the courage or to have the initiative
100%.
to open up that conversation, which was you. And then did that then transfer into a more positive outcome, or where did it lead from that point?
Yeah, well, after that, of course, the lads started to invite me out, and I was definitely uncomfortable with that in the beginning, particularly sort of talking with girls, because I went to an all-boys school, and I was really self-conscious of my disability, and I didn't have sort of the experience that the lads would have had. They would have been socializing with girls or whatever from 12, 13, and I kind of came in at 16, and it was really, really uncomfortable for me. Like, I was really sort of self-conscious, but I was happy that I was part of that now, and I wasn't happy to be struggling so much with that, but I knew that's something that I needed to go through, and I needed to, and I was really, a lot of the lads were drinking at this stage or whatever, and I wasn't really comfortable doing that either, and it was just hard, I suppose, in the beginning, socializing, but it was sort of, and this is something I always explain, and something that I've stood to me, I think, later in my life, is you need to be prepared to go through that sort of uncomfortable time where nothing's working and everything feels awkward, and you need to go through that period in order to sort of get good at whatever it is that you're trying to get good at, or get comfortable with whatever it is that you're trying to get good at. And that was just socializing for me. I was so uncomfortable doing it because I'd just never done it before. I was a few years behind the lads. They were 3 or 4 years ahead of me in that regard. But I was happy that eventually during transition year, I started to get out and about. I'd go to the rugby matches. I'd go to some parties on the weekend, and then they'd even come to some of my table tennis matches, and it was all just much better. It wasn't just in the classroom, my social life, and I that really, I think, stood to me, and it brought me out of myself a lot more. And but it was all just to do with fear and sort of holding back, and I always, it's something that I've been guilty of even later in life. Like fear affects us all, and you kind of worry about the worst case scenario so often, and how often does that worst case scenario actually happen?
Yeah, true.
Nearly never.
Yeah, a couple of things there. I mean, as you mentioned, the confidence that you want in your life, or the betterment, or the love, or the prosperity, is always going to be found on the other side of the struggle, isn't it?
Yeah,
Because
it's the only way.
Going through the struggle, you realize the courage that you have, which then transfers to confidence, or the resilience you have, which transfers into strength, and you take that strength and that resilience, that confidence with you to take on more opportunities, because you realize that didn't break me, that actually helped me become better.
100%. And then it is like a cycle. It's like you say, and that was kind of how I built my confidence. I said I was going to do something, and then I did it, and I might not have done it immediately, but I promised myself that I'd send that email to the coach, and I promised myself that I'd turn up to training every day, and I promised myself that I'd eat better, and I promised myself that I'd talk to the lads, even at 15, 16, when it was really uncomfortable. I was just determined to, get to the bottom of it, and whatever the answer was going to be, I said I was going to do it, and I did it. And, I think all those little promises that we make to ourselves, when we keep them, improve the relationship we have with ourselves, which I think I always talk about this. That's been the most important. My parents were obviously massively supportive. I've had some brilliant friends and coaches over the years, but at the end of the day, the relationship that I had with myself was the most important. And
of course,
we're stuck with ourselves till the day that we die. So
true. And that's often reflected back to you then through the other people, isn't it? Because if something that's coming to me there as you're telling that story, and you're sort of bringing, your life into this conversation, is, people sort of looking upon you with pity.
Exactly.
And feeling sorry for you, which is not what you want or need.
Not, but a very common, I would say, thing to happen in Ireland, particularly with people with disability. Like, there is even still this old-fashioned attitude, and in Ireland in particular, I would say, God bless you. Like, a lot of sort of old men and old ladies would say that to me on the bus, just because I'm in the wheelchair, and that's still there today.
Yeah.
And it was much more prominent 20 years ago. And it does get in on me a little bit, if I let it. And certainly back then it did. And it just sort of made making excuses for myself a lot easier. And
like, I can't do this because of my disability.
Yeah.
And, I'm just this way because
when
of my disability.
When you've been told that all the time, it's
yeah.
difficult then to say, no, I can be independent. I can live independently.
Yeah.
When, like, everyone, including the doctors from the day I was born, told me that I'd never be independent and that I couldn't do this and I couldn't do that. And now, of course, I live independently.
Yeah, here you are. Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. Well, was there a turning point there in terms of, okay, I'm not taking anyone else's projections here anymore. They're like, I'm going to set out here, I'm going to live my own life and be my own person, and again, live independently? Or do you feel that was just unfolding from your earlier years? Or?
Yeah. I mean, I think my parents played a very important part in that, like, because, like, from day one, they were told that. And, bearing in mind, my mum and dad, they had no idea the day that I was born that I was going to be born with one arm and no legs. And, I was the first one born in Ireland with my condition, and, like, it's hard to put into words, the shock of that for a mother and a father, and just combined with the fact that there was no social media and no knowledge around disability, and, the doctors made it much worse because they just didn't know any better. They said this kid is,
again, assumptions.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. This kid is, I just don't know what the future holds for him, and, he's not going to be able to do this and that, and he's not going to be able to have a job, he's not going to be able to be independent or earn money. And, they heard that from day one, but, that neither of them accepted it. And I think it all started with, well, my first memory, or the one that they often talk about, was leaving the uniform out on the bed, and it sort of all went from there. And, the doctors said that I'd never be able to dress myself, but then I knew from age 9 that I could dress myself, and, it sort of went on from there. But, it wasn't an upward trajectory all the time. There was times where I doubted myself, and people said things over the years, and I saw things on TV and social media, and there's things that kind of held me back over the years, but I always just remembered that if I could do this, maybe I could drive a car someday or live independently, and it all went from there.
Yeah, that uniform meant a lot, didn't it? I mean, when you're telling a story, you say from the age of 4 till the age of 9. It wasn't from the age of 4 to the age of 5, the age of 9. So I can only imagine the frustrations and the failures and the anger and the sadness and all the setbacks along the way.
Yeah,
from the age of 4 to 9. But you didn't give up.
No, never. And they wouldn't have let me give up. And I think it was easier in the beginning. I wasn't that aware. I was having a bit of fun putting it on. But then, when all my friends could dress themselves, then suddenly it kind of became like, I need to get this done. I need to find a way. And I think that probably just accelerated it further. But yeah, I mean, even looking back, to have been able to, because I had 3 prosthetics at the time as well. So it was, you could say it was harder for me to put on my uniform than, it wasn't just the uniform, it was the 3 prosthetics and the uniform,
so you
the
had
shirt
the
and the
prosthetics
tie.
as well.
And, I mean, there's some 9-year-olds today that don't dress themselves.
Yeah.
Or that, they get
or at
help
least
with it.
as well as you probably did at 9. Yeah.
Or certainly they get help with the tie. The tie is tricky, to be fair.
Yeah, that was like the icing on the cake for you. That was just once.
The tie is tricky with 2 hands, I'm told.
Yeah. Was it an elastic tie?
No.
It wasn't an elastic tie?
It was real. I didn't like the elastic ones.
Yeah, that's
they're easier
there.
though.
Yeah, fair play, man.
Yeah.
And then so then, like, again, going into that sort of trajectory of the childhood into teenage years, and those incredibly formative years, and then now you're out there socializing, and now you're being exposed to women and potential relationships, and that's difficult for every man in any situation.
Exactly.
So what was that like for you as you sort of moved into this territory?
Yeah, very uncomfortable at the start, I would say. I felt like, when I was speaking to girls, that, the only thing that they would see is my disability, especially because my disability is obviously very visual, and I'm in the wheelchair, and I stopped wearing my prosthetics over a time, or I didn't wear them at all times. So, you could really see that I have no legs and 1 arm. But I suppose when you're younger, that's sort of all you see and all that you think the girls will see. And I don't know what the way I look at it now is, of course, there's still, plenty of girls and plenty of women that wouldn't want to be with someone with a disability or in a wheelchair. And I think I always say that that's like completely fine. There's types of women and types of men that, are not our type, and, that's fair enough. But there's also a lot of girls and a lot of women that, do or would be interested in me and wouldn't have a problem going out with someone in a wheelchair or with a disability. And I found that. And I suppose once I realized that I was just kind of like any man, probably you're a good looking guy, Gav, but probably not every girl is into you.
No, it's not all about looks, man. Yeah, I'm a pain in the ass sometimes too. So yeah, they don't see that piece. Yeah.
Fair enough.
I'm a hard man to live with.
Yeah. Me too.
Yeah. But I actually, I was watching one of your videos there on social media, and you were talking about something around relationships and women, and then I started reading through the comments, and I was reading some comments, but you are so handsome. You're one of the best.
Heard it once or twice.
You're the best looking man I've ever seen.
We've got a handsome face. Anyway.
Yeah. It's like, okay, let's slide into your DMs there. Yeah. It's like, and so at the moment, what's that been like? That sort of navigating that territory. And
well, it was a bit mad at the beginning, to be honest. I've had a couple of girls over the years tell me that I was handsome or whatever. But of course, when my videos went viral on Instagram, I got a lot of messages and a lot of comments, and it was a kind of a weird thing. It's just not something that I ever thought would happen. And I mean, it's nice to hear, but it's also like, it's very surface level, and it's nice to get comments like that. But I suppose I rather sort of get messages, people telling me that I've helped them, or that I'm sort of, that they've taken something from what I've said, rather than, it's just, your hands. It's nice to
Yeah,
hear,
yeah.
of course, but it is like very surface level, and I suppose I'd be more happy if
They can experience
men or women that watch my
Yeah.
my videos kind of see them like for what they are and for what they're supposed to be, which is, I want, like I said, I want to shift perspective, and I want to help people out of sort of dark times, because I know, like I said, I know what it's like to go through all that. I know what it's like to have no confidence and to, feel that I'm not enough or not good enough. And it's sort of one of my big goals in life now, is to sort of help people see that, they can do it too.
Yeah.
If I can do it.
Yeah. What were some of your darkest moments there?
I think the teenage years were a big struggle for me. Like I said, I just felt sort of quite alone and kind of quite inferior to a lot of my friends who, a lot of them would have played rugby for Leinster and for Ireland. And I would have spent a lot of time with boys like that, and it was tough. I always just felt like I was sort of never going to reach that level, or that's what I had in my head of being a man or whatever, was to sort of be strong and be fit and be popular with the girls and play rugby and earn loads of money. And that was
what got you through that?
Well, table tennis was a big thing. That was all I had for years.
That was at age 16 though, was it?
No. I would have started playing table tennis at like 11 or 12.
Oh, so you started early.
Yeah, but I wouldn't have really sort of, it wasn't really my sport. I didn't sort of take it seriously, or I wasn't involved with the Irish team. Yeah,
sort of
exactly.
Yeah.
It was like a hobby, something to do in the evenings, until it really became my sport, and I started to take it seriously. And, I suppose when I achieved success in table tennis, then I always say, this is my mum's line was, you're never going to match your friends on the rugby pitch, but you can more than match them in the classroom, and she always said there was no reason why I couldn't do well on the Leaving Cert and the exams. She always felt that I was clever, even though in my earlier years I used my disability as an excuse, not to study. But that line often stuck with me, that okay, I couldn't match my friends on the rugby pitch, but I could more than match them in the classroom. And then, having achieved the success in table tennis, I started to apply myself in 5th and 6th year. I started to set some small goals, short-term goals, like I did in table tennis, and slowly started to reach those goals. And then I got 580 points in the Leaving Cert, and
580.
I got into actuary, which was the highest points course in the country at the time. And
what was the course?
Actuarial and financial studies.
Wow. Okay.
I studied actuary in UCD.
I have no idea what actuary is.
Most people don't.
That's my level
of
intelligence.
Niche finance. Well, I'm a long way out of the game now, but it was just like back in transition year. I spoke to my guidance counsellor, and I liked maths. It wasn't particularly good at it at that stage, but I liked maths, and I liked the sound of actuary, even though I knew it was like 580 or something.
Sounds like a superpower.
Yeah, it's like becoming a doctor. Like really, it was up with medicine. On the points, and he told me he meant it in a nice way, but I remember him looking at me like I had 3 heads, and laughing at me when I said that I wanted to study actuary. And I thought back to then, when the doctors told my parents, that I wouldn't be able to dress myself, or I'd never be independent, or I'd never earn money. Because actually, it wasn't just the highest points course in the country, but it was also the highest paid job in Ireland at the time. And that was probably a bad motivation to want to, for what to study. But that was my motivation to study actuary, because I wanted to prove to people that I could earn money, and I could have a high paid job.
It was a motivation that served you, though.
That was the motivation that served me, and I did do that. Then I got the points in the Leaving Cert. I got through 4 years of actuary in UCD, and I worked as an actuary then for 3 or 4 years, and it was highly paid. But it was always it was from that kind of inferiority or doctors
driven by insecurity.
Insecurity. Yeah. That, I thought, maybe sort of girls would want me then if I had a high paid job, and, I'd proved so many people wrong, that would told me that I could never work or I could never earn money. And now I have the highest pay, or I would have the highest paid job in Ireland. And it was all, that was like, looking back, it was such a stupid reason to want to, I don't think that should be anyone's reason for a job.
But that's where you were at that time.
That's where I was at that time.
Yeah.
And when I realized that, then that's why I left actually.
Was that difficult for you to?
It was very difficult, and probably not something that my mum was too happy about at the time. To leave actuary and a very high paid job in finance to become a table tennis player. That didn't go down too well at the dinner table, I can tell you.
I hear that. Yeah, I hear that. But at the same time, you did it.
I did it. Yeah. So I gave up actuary. And it was around the time of COVID. So I'd given up my job.
Good old COVID, yeah.
And then COVID struck and I had no job and I had no table tennis because the restrictions were very strict here in Ireland. So I had no job and no sport. So I decided that I'd play for a club in Germany where the restrictions were a lot less, and I'd move away to Slovakia. So I moved to Bratislava to one of my good friends that lived there, also a table tennis player in a wheelchair, part of the Paralympic team in Slovakia. And I trained there for 11 months, and the games were postponed obviously by a year. Tokyo 2020 became 2021, and I did qualify for Tokyo, and because I had missed Rio 4 years previously because I was studying for actuary.
Oh, okay.
And that stuck with me, and it became more and more apparent then. Even though I was earning a good salary, I was working off the face of the earth and trying to study and trying to play table tennis, and I just I ended up doing nothing well. And I said, like, in 10, 20 years time, what am I going to look back at and regret that I didn't do, or be happy that I at least tried? And I felt that I owed it to myself and, to all the people who supported me, and even just to the sport of table tennis and sort of what it's given me in life. I felt that I'd be stupid not to try and become my best, whatever that was. And, from that sort of day, I've wanted to leave no stone unturned and just being my best. And I don't measure, like back then I would have measured myself by a ranking, or, if I was number one in Ireland or number one in Europe, or that would be all that mattered to me. But now it's just sort of doing my best and performing my best in the way I know that I can. And, if I can do that, then I'm happy. And that's sort of the stage that I'm at with table tennis now. I'm thought that maybe I'd be finished after Paris, but I'm still going, and I'm at my highest ranking ever now. And I just want to see how far I can go.
Class, man. Big thanks to Earthkind, our new sponsor of the Modern Warrior podcast. They have some incredible products like the Tallow and Honey Balm, which is great for skin hydration and repair. And then they've got the Wild Yam Balm, which helps to relax the body and calm the mind. I've been using both of these products. The Wild Yam Balm has certainly been helping with my sleep, and the Tallow and Honey Balm has certainly helped with my skin. So go check them out. Click the link below and grab yourself a couple of these. Yeah, I'm just reflecting back on that journey between, you're given this incredible obstacle to move into that very high paid job. And, this is another huge goal for you, which again comes with some false expectations, as you came to realize later on. But you had to realize that this is actually not the answers, or this is not the life that I want. I imagine something different here, which is why, again, I'd always empathize with people who are looking back at their past going, oh, well, if I only knew different. It's like, but you didn't know different, and you had to actually go through that experience to now know. So you can look back at that experience and go, oh, thank you for that experience, because that actually redirected me and brought me to where I am today.
Absolutely, no regrets. And it was such a tough decision at the time.
Yeah, that's what I'm
like it goes without
yeah.
saying that actuary is a lot better paid job at table tennis. It's also a lot safer and more secure. And, you know, I was at that point in actuarial and in finance that I was kind of starting to know what I was at. And I could have seen myself moving up the ladder. But yeah, I just, Paralympics and table tennis was always my dream. And I was speaking at that stage as well. And even though it's taken me sort of a lot longer to sort of start driving that, that was always something that I wanted to do as well, was to, you know, at this stage I was speaking at schools. I wanted to speak in companies and, you know, wellness fests and mental health institutes. I've spoken at various sort of intermediaries like yourself.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's only really been in the last sort of year or two that I've really started to take that seriously and try to reach more people and have an impact. But that was always my goal. You know, when I left actuary, I just kind of saw myself as an athlete, but more than an athlete, because we're all more than just one thing.
Of course.
I think so many athletes sort of just
become defined by their sport.
And then suddenly when it's time to retire, they don't have anything. And I think that's such an important line. And that's something, you know, from a young age, I always just saw myself as a table tennis player, and, you know, that was that. And I couldn't be anything more than that. But now I don't look at it that way at all. And they definitely complement each other. And, you know, I'm probably at my best. I am at my best ever level now. And it's because I have other things in my life. And it's when I come to the table tennis table now, I actually want to play.
Yeah.
Before it was just, you know, a chore a lot of days.
Yeah.
You know, I was training every day. I had nothing else. I lived and I was just waiting for 10 o'clock for my training session. And then I was waiting for 2 o'clock for my next training session. And there was nothing else.
Okay.
And then if the results weren't going well, which it's very, very tough internationally, it's up and down. I've had good results, I've had bad results. But then if that wasn't going well, nothing was going well and my life was a disaster, you know. But now, you know, at least if I lose a match in the weekend, I have speaking, I have social media, I have my relationships, I have my gym, I have my health, and there's much more in my life now. And, you know, I think that's very important for anyone.
Yeah, you sort of remove the pressures, so you can, it sort of
You're
goes
free.
a bit more, it's a bit more of a flow than a force.
Yeah, we can't control the result. You know, that's something that I didn't realize really when I was young. We can be our best, but sometimes it's not good enough on the day. And that doesn't mean we can play badly, we can play well, but ultimately we can't really control the outcome. And, you know, if you're defining your happiness on a result or a ranking, you're going to be very unhappy a lot of the time.
It's going to be quite a volatile life. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah. But again, had to go through those experiences to realize that too, isn't it? So is there one experience you look back at and you'd sort of identify it as a defining moment? Like could be with the table tennis or in your life in general, where you go, that was a moment that felt like a redirection, that sort of brought me somewhere that I'd never been before, or started to see things or see myself in a way that I'd never had before. Is there?
Yeah, I mean, there's been loads of times. Like I said, missing the Rio Paralympic Games by one place was really, really disappointing because, you know, I really felt that I was going to get in. And even though it wasn't my primary focus then, and I was studying the actuarial at this stage, and I suppose that moment made me realize I need more than table tennis, you know, because I've lost my funding now. I haven't qualified for Rio, and everything that I wanted, I'm not going to get. And even though actuarial was probably the wrong career for me, it sort of made me realize I need to be more than a table tennis player. And then the year after, I won the European Championships, and I started to think, oh, maybe I don't need more than table tennis. You know, maybe things are pretty good now. So I continue like that, and then the year after, I was reclassified. And, you know, for the listeners that don't know, Paralympics is classified on the severity of your disability. And I was born with my disability. I was born with no legs and one arm, and I presumed that was something that was never going to change. But after I won the European Championships, I was classified up into class 3, being in class 2 from the age of 12. And that, again, sounds like a good thing probably to most of the listeners, or sounds like nothing to most people. But what that meant was that I was going to lose my ranking. I was going to lose my funding. And to this day, then I've been competing against athletes that were considerably physically stronger than me, or less disabled, whatever way you want to say that, or less disabled than the category below that I would have competed in for years. And it was at that moment then that I really felt, I needed more things in my life. If, and I don't want to go into the politics or the how much I disagree with the decision that was made that day, or how unfair it was, or how quickly the decision was made that the doctors classified me, and the classification was over within 10 minutes, and they ruined my career and everything that I worked for within 10 minutes. And I went from, being fourth in the world at that time and European champion to 37 or whatever it was in the world in the class 3. So I was one of the best players in the world, and then now I was like a journeyman again. And, I'm not going to go on about that any longer, but firstly, that reclassification made me realize that sport is just so unpredictable. And so, you can be injured. I was injured again then shortly after that time. Someone else's decision can just spiral your career in one moment and everything you've worked for. And, I could go on and speak negatively about my reclassification, but, there's actually a lot of positives that have come out of that. And, it was only then that I started to focus on myself. And I realized that I had to reinvent myself as a table tennis player. I had to become a better table tennis player. It's as simple as that.
Yeah.
Like holding on to this level that I had, or holding on to this sort of idea of myself as being number 4 or 5 in the world and being number 1 in Ireland, and being so protective of that and what I had, and sort of doing anything to win. It didn't matter what. The result was all that mattered. And I feel if I'd continued in that vein, that the other boys would have caught up with me pretty quickly, because I was never focused on improving. I was never focused on how can this be better. It was just sort of defending what I had. And I started to then sort of have a more offensive and attacking mindset. And I became it literally changed from being a defender to being an attacker in table tennis. Because I felt like, I wanted to take things into my own hands or hand. And I had to sort of sail away from the safe harbor for the first time since I started playing table tennis. And it was really liberating, and I started to enjoy table tennis much more. And I started to improve much more as a table tennis player. And I'm 10 million times the player than I was in 2018 when that happened. And I'm 8th in the world now. So I'm not even the ranking that I was in class 2, and that's what year we in now, 2026, 8 years. Is that right? Yeah, 8 years.
So you worked your way up from 36 to
36,
something?
39. I've been up and down, and now I'm at my
and
highest, and I've became 3rd in the European Championship. So I haven't won the European Championship since being in the new class.
Yet.
Yes, exactly. But my point is, I don't know how, it doesn't matter how I'm measured. It's now being my best. And, class. All the players in my class have 2 arms. They can all move the wheelchair. I'm the only one who plays with my brakes on. Not to poor mouth myself at all, but
You're more restricted.
I can't rotate my body the way they can. And also serving is very difficult for me. Everything is more difficult in the new class. And I do, particularly at the top, I really notice, being being physically limited, but, I've developed my own sort of unique style, and I really feel I use what I've got now. And I think that's sort of the beauty of the Paralympics. And I'm not going to go on much more, but to say that disability is a really difficult thing to quantify. And I was probably fortunate to have been in the lower class for years, because I had such a unique disability. There was no class for me. And now I'm at a big disadvantage in my new class, in class 3. But at the end of the day, it's about me, and it's about you, and it's about what we bring. And that's really what I try and focus on now, rather than the result or my opponent or things that I can't control.
Yeah.
I really just try and focus on what I can control. And that's sort of, quite liberating, like I say, and it's much more enjoyable as a result.
I'm hearing echoes of your mother there coming through from what she told you when you were younger, but okay, maybe you're not able to match the boys in the rugby pitch, but you can match them in the classroom or outmatch them in the classroom, which you did. And it's something similar there with with the table tennis. Okay, maybe you can't match this individual who's a bit more able-bodied and more and maybe more physically able than you. But let's focus on your strengths. Focus on you can outmatch them.
There.
In your
table tennis. Another reason I love table tennis is it's a very much a mental sport. It can change so quickly. It's such a complicated sport. There's so many different styles, different ways of playing. There's so much more at play than just being fit, strong, and being fast. There's so many different types of good players. And that's what I love so much about it. There's so many different ways to play the game.
And your mathematical ability sort of comes through in table tennis.
Definitely, you've got to be very tactical. You've got to be able to change quickly. If something isn't working, you don't have time to. If your way of playing and your strategy isn't working, you need to be able to change that quickly, or your opponent's the game's going to be over before you know it. And I always knew when I was reclassified I could get better at that. Because I was very tunnel vision. Sort of the way I was playing, the defensive way that I was playing in class 2 was working very well. And like anything in life, when things are going super well and I'm winning all around me, well, why would I change?
Exactly.
And it was only then that I started losing all the time that I thought, oh, I need to change something here. I need to become better. And I think that's such a powerful lesson in life, when we're comfortable and when everything's going well, we don't really question ourselves, do we? But it's only when everyone around you is doing things better that suddenly you have to look at yourself and say, I need to be better too.
And then what does sort of taking it back to yourself and to life today, how is it for you in terms of being independent and having your own life? What are some of the obstacles that you have to overcome that maybe, we don't see or we don't know about? What's that like for you in terms of, let's say, your day-to-day sort of process?
Yeah, well, I would say I'm probably in a good space at the moment. Of course, I have my bad days like anyone, but like I was telling you earlier, I feel like I'm in a much stronger position these days, and I think I have a good perspective on life. And that doesn't mean that I don't have bad days, because I do. I do have bad days, but I just think that I have a good balance in my life now, a much better balance than I had before. I have my table tennis. I still train really hard at that. I'm 16 hours a week on the table, and I'm in the gym 6 days a week, and I still train really hard. But it's like, once I do the training, I leave the training there and I don't take it home with me. And, I have the speaking now, and I have social media. I'm trying to be active on that. And, I just have much more in my life, I would say, these days, and I have a better balance. And, I think outside of table tennis, like I said, sort of shifting perspective and reaching people and sort of bringing people up and helping people through tough times is a big motivation of mine. And I'm not looking at retirement from table tennis yet, but I'm looking to the future and, what I would like then. And I really just want to sort of continue as I am now. And it doesn't mean that I don't have the struggles. And I talk a lot about the struggles still. I'm struggling to qualify for World Championships this year, which it's really tough. I feel like I'm at my best ever level, but so far this year, like the results haven't really come, and that's just the way sometimes. But I really feel if I keep going the way I'm going, that the results will come. And sometimes we don't get what we deserve. In the moment, we just have to keep it going. But I'm in a good place, I would say now, and that's funny because I've had so many struggles over the years. But and I know the struggles and the adversities it will come again. And I know I have that knowledge now that I've had good times. Like I said, when I won the European Championships, and I was earning big money as an actuary, and everything was good. I had a girlfriend at the time, and then suddenly it all went away. And I know things are good now, and I'm really grateful. But there's going to be a time where the tough times are going to come. But I think the crucial difference now is that I'm sort of much more able for the tough times when they do come along, and I have perspective, and I know that no matter how bad things are going, that there's always someone much worse off. And, you know, that wasn't something that I really believed sort of growing up in an able-bodied school, you know, when I was the only kid in the school with a disability, and, you know, I had one arm and no legs, quite a severe physical disability. I thought that I was, you know, I was the worst off. There was nobody worse. I was such a small little bubble that I was in, you know. Growing up in a private school and in South Dublin, you know, where sort of everyone appeared to have it all, but, you know, now I know that wasn't the case, and I didn't really have to look very far to see people much worse off than myself. You know, when I met someone with no arms and no legs, that was sort of a very important turning point, I would say, in my teenage years. Suddenly, I realized I had a lot to be grateful for.
Yeah. And then as you move forward now as well, obviously talking a lot about the table tennis and your pursuits as a speaker and big projects coming up for you. Obviously there's the personal goals too, in terms of relationship and family and all these kind of things that I'm sure you're considering.
100%. Yeah. I mean, I'm still very close with my family, my mum, my dad, and my brother. The family is always important to me. I'm still friends with a lot of the same lads, the rugby lads, and I'm friends within table tennis now. And you know, my friends are so important to me as well. And then I have a girlfriend now as well. So
good, man.
Look,
fair play.
It's all going well, like I said, at the moment. So
was this one of the girls that commented on your video? No,
yeah, it was actually.
Was it?
Yeah,
brilliant. I think that's the power of social media, right there,
exactly,
isn't it?
You know,
you're struggling to get a woman, man. Yeah, just put
exactly.
Put up a post about how you're struggling to get a woman.
You never know who might like you.
Yeah, excellent, man. So this is quite new then, is it?
Yeah.
Fair play. Going well.
Yeah, going very well.
Yeah.
Happy out. So
yeah, and so that like those aspirations are obviously very real for you as well in terms of having this.
Yeah. I mean, that was never my goal when I made the video, but like
that's
I
understand.
and I made a video I think later in after my girlfriend had seen the video, and I made a video about that you have to be seen to be chosen. And
brilliant, love that.
That's something that I didn't do, particularly in my teenage years and in my earlier 20s. That you know, if people don't know you exist, you literally have no chance. You know, and people didn't know the real me, and they didn't know that I exist. The girls didn't know that I exist because I didn't put myself out there, and even when I did, I didn't put the real me forward. It was a half version of me. I didn't ever say what I wanted to say. I didn't ever do what I wanted to do. And so they didn't really know the real Colin Judge. And I think that's a very powerful thing. Not everybody wants a relationship, and I wasn't looking for one. I can tell you that. When I made my videos, that wasn't my motivation. But you know, it is a powerful thing. Like if you don't put yourself out there, and you're even if you're limited, if the amount of people that know you're limited, like you have very little chance like of finding the right person. And but on the contrary, if you put yourself out there and you're being authentic and you're being yourself, and you know, I'm putting my disability out there, you can see I have one arm and no legs, well then you've got some chance. Then maybe someone might like you.
Yeah.
You know. And
such an important line, man. You have to be seen to be chosen.
Yeah. I think it's
too many of us are shrinking and hiding.
Yeah. It's not something I've really heard like that many people talk about, but it's such an important thing.
Yeah.
You know, and not everybody wants to be seen, and that's fine. But just realize that if you're not seen, and it doesn't matter what you're doing, it doesn't matter if you're looking for a relationship or even if you're a table tennis player. And you know, now I try and speak about like. Table tennis, it's a minority sport in Ireland, and it's a great sport, but it's not that many people know about it, not that many people play, and it's only because people don't know that it exists. You know, it's the same thing, and it doesn't matter what business you're trying to run. If people don't, you can be a brilliant speaker, you can be a fantastic businessman, you can be, you can sell the best T-shirts in the world, but if people don't know about it, well, you don't have any chance.
The world's best kept secret.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Perhaps
it's all gone well.
Perhaps you're the world's best kept secret, Colin. The secret is out.
Until now, the secret is out.
That's class, man. And then like having a family and all that is something you'd look to in the future?
I mean, it's not probably on my radar at the moment. Like I said, I have been, like, up until now, I've been quite focused on myself, and I've been very much sort of trying to reach my highest level as an athlete and become the best speaker that I can be. But yeah, of course, in the future, I think it's lovely to be able to share your life with someone. And I haven't really thought about kids or a family, to be honest. I think that's not really something that's on my radar, to be honest. I'm not really looking beyond 2028 at the moment. But I really just want to continue as I am. And, I feel like I've been consistent with what I've been sort of promised myself that I would be doing. And I put it off for so long, let me tell you. And, that was fear again, even at the age of 29, 30, when I'd consider myself pretty confident at this stage. It was still fear. I was always very afraid of speaking to the camera and making videos. And, it is like, I was very, like, as I don't know if you saw my earlier videos, like I was very cringe and I was like stuttering and stammering and sweating as well and gone red in the face. And, I'm by no means a brilliant speaker, or like, I'm not fantastic at speaking to the camera, but
you're doing pretty well, man.
I'm much better than I was 8 months ago.
Mm-hmm.
And, I'm like a broken record at this stage, but fear really does just hold us back so much. And it's amazing that, when you might have a few, the lads joking about your videos, replying to me at the start, but they're not joking anymore though.
Good.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
jokes on them. Yeah.
Yeah,
Where's your video, lads? I can see a video of you on your Instagram.
Yeah.
Go on, give it a go there. Yeah. Yeah. It's usually those ones, isn't it? Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
You put a video out there? No.
Yeah,
okay,
exactly. So. It's the people that criticize you. They're just the people that sort of sat on the fence and sort of never did what they said that they were going to do. And
provoking
it is
their insecurities.
Yeah, exactly. And it is really, really hard to come out, and as I'm sure you know, and you've done it too.
Yeah.
Like, it is very difficult to talk about your sort of deepest, darkest times, and even just speaking on a camera or setting up a podcast. It is really, really uncomfortable especially when you don't know your guest, and you don't. Is it going to be awkward? Are you going to have a good conversation? All those things they're very uncomfortable to do, particularly in the beginning. You do get better at it as you go along, but I think you've got to respect anyone who's doing something different and who's chasing their dreams, but most importantly, who just did what they said that they were going to do.
Yeah.
Because so many of us don't do that.
Yeah. I think it's just having that sort of approach of curiosity, because even as you come in here to the studio, and I was having a conversation with somebody before I came in, and I was talking to a few of my friends about the guest I was having today, and I was telling them, they were asking me about you, and I said, I don't like to get to know Colin too much before I speak to him, because it brings more curiosity to the conversation for me. Like, this to me is me getting to know you as well as the audience 100%. Getting to know you, and that curiosity sort of opens up more of a path of exploration. Such as, again, you look at your path in your life here, you become curious about yourself, curious about different sports. I mean, table tennis was the 8th or 9th sport you tried.
Not a sport that I ever thought.
Just a curiosity there that just kept driving you on.
Yeah.
And that curiosity is still there, of course, with looking at different angles and different opportunities, speaking events, curiosity around you're only, whatever it is, 8 months on social media.
Yeah.
Okay, I wonder what would happen here if I put myself out here.
If you kept going, yeah.
And that curiosity, as I said, it can open up massive doors for us in our life, just instead of the fear of judgment.
Yeah.
And obviously, I'm sure you're well aware now, putting yourself out there and the videos you share and speaking events, you're helping so many people.
I've had a lot of messages reach out to me, and there was one, I haven't really spoken about this yet, but there's actually been a few since, but there's one that really stopped me in my tracks. That there was a woman from America messaged me a few months ago, and she said that I made her rethink suicide, so that I stopped her. She wrote me a big long message, and I was stuck for words. And I've spoken with her since, and I get a lot of messages, and I probably miss most of them, but that message just, and it came at such an important, because I've been doing it for a few months now, and I wasn't getting very many views, and yourself, it's really hard on social media. You kind of post and post and post when all you want is for your content to be seen, and it's so tough and so competitive now, obviously, as you know. And I was really sort of losing. I wasn't going to stop, but I was kind of at a low point. I felt like my delivery was really bad, and I made this video. It was me having a joke about my disability, and to get that message, like, you just don't know the way someone is going to interpret your video. But this lady was like, she wanted to commit suicide, and she felt that I helped her out of a very dark time, and we've spoken since then, and like, it just made me think,
Yeah,
it's hard to put into words, like the benefits of sort of sharing your story and your struggles, and something that you've learned the hard way.
Yeah,
because you really don't know who it's going to help.
Yeah, it's massive. Well, that's the impact you're having. Yeah, but it's your courage to be vulnerable.
Yeah,
and someone else there feeling so vulnerable.
Yeah,
and taking the strength from you being so vulnerable that then transfers to them, and gives them some strength and hope to move through their struggle. So it's almost like that exchange of energy where you're going, look, I'm strong enough here to open up about my vulnerability. You're hiding behind it. And that obviously gave her such a sense of hope and inspiration that she's thankfully still here today, and it's massive. That's the impact.
Yeah.
And of course that drives you on then. It's going,
course,
wow, okay,
I
let's
didn't need any motivation than that.
Yeah.
And I never thought, and that was never I didn't think that I could even possibly. I always saw my story, like, I never saw it as anything special. And I think a lot of us think that. But what I always tell to people, because, when people say, no one would care about my story. And, I always say, like, that my story and, growing up with one arm and no legs, it's not really relatable to the vast majority of people, able-bodied people, and I feel like I have to sort of work hard to make my own stories relatable to people. But like the average person out there, your able-bodied person who thinks that they don't have a story to share, like, everyone has a story to share, and everyone has their own perspective, and everyone has their own struggles. And, now I really feel that you're kind of selfish if you don't share your story. If you have something that you've learned the hard way and you don't share it and you don't let people know, and this is coming from someone who didn't share it for a long time and never saw himself as selfish, but like, it is selfish if you're only coming at it from your angle. And and it's terrible to look back, and hindsight is a great thing, but I often think, like, who would have benefited had I spoken sooner? When you get messages like that.
Yeah, it's not just
it's
about me.
It's not about me, and it's like the speaking. It's not about me. It's not about how much I'm sweating, or how much I'm red in the cheeks, or how many times I forget my lines. It's about the audience.
Yeah.
It's about the people watching and the people listening and what they might take from it. And when you frame it like that, and it becomes less about you and more about what you're trying to deliver. And the more you put yourself in uncomfortable situations, and the more that you speak, and the more you tell your story, the better that you're going to do it, and the more people that you're going to impact.
Class. Colin, man, absolutely love this conversation. It's flown in.
It has. I don't know what time it is, but I've enjoyed it.
We're over the hour mark. It's just, and thank you so much for your presence, for your energy, for, again, the impact you're creating in people's lives. Keep showing up.
Thank you, Gavin. You too. You're doing great work yourself, and I appreciate you having me on.
Goes both ways, my man. And for any of the listeners here who want to check you out, follow you, your journey, again, your brilliant content, let us all know where to find you.
Colin Judge 100 is my handle.
Good man. 100%.
Yeah. Well, I always try to give it 100.
Good man. I appreciate that, Colin.
Thanks, my friend.
Nice one. Thank you again for tuning in to this episode. If there has been something that has resonated with you on this conversation, ping me a message over on Instagram at Gavin Meenan and let me know what it was. Chat soon.